All right, everybody, welcome to week 8. Just to recap, last week we did some advanced CSS and we turned our old recipes page into this new recipes page. And we added some headings and some logos and some interesting new style and generally just made it look leaps and bounds better than our quickie CSS that we had in there before. Now, one thing I forgot to add last week that I wanted to, but we can definitely cover this week, is the drop shadow around the outside of the container. If you look at the Photoshop comp from last week, you will notice that there's a slight drop shadow, and I wanted to show you guys how to accomplish that using just CSS. So, if we head on over to our CSS file and find our container section, our container div, we can add a box shadow rule here that will give us a nice shadow around the outside of our around the outside of our container. So let me just start with this and see where that gets us. Okay, so a couple things to notice right off the bat. First is that our main section also encompasses our HTML page here, also encompasses our heading. So that kind of takes away from the look and feel that we had going there. That doesn't actually quite look right. So we're going to have to change that up, but let's get our box shadow looking how we want it first. So basically the first two values here are the offset of the shadow. So if we wanted this, if we went 10 pixels, 10 pixels, you'll see that the box shadow is now 10 pixels to the right and 10 pixels down. You could accomplish similar things in the other direction by adding negative values there. So since I want my drop shadow to be directly behind the object, we're going to leave that at 0, 0. Now, this third value here is the spread of the drop shadow. So how far does it spread out away? And you can kind of experiment with this to see what will work and what won't. And your mileage is going to vary depending on browser here. So you're going to want to make sure you test this in other browsers. And then finally, the last element here is our color. So what color we want this drop shadow to be. And I actually want mine to be a little bit lighter because I want it to kind of blend in. See, that's almost too light. I'm starting to see the gray. So we want to make sure that's a little bit darker. Maybe something like that. That looks pretty good. So now what we don't want to do is we don't want this wrapping around the whole section. So let's try this box shadow out somewhere else. Like let's try it out on recipes. Let's see what that looks like. All right, that's looking a little bit better. So now we've got a nice little drop shadow. I actually still think it could be a little bit darker. So let's go back to where we had it there. All right. And so now our mock-up is looking a little bit better. So that was the only other CSS bit left over from week 7. So hopefully you have your recipe site up to this point. This week we're going to be adding some web fonts. We're going to use Typekit and add some nice looking web fonts. Get away from just our standard Helvetica or Times New Roman or Georgia. And then we're also going to do some additional embeds. So I'm going to show you how to embed a video both in a raw manner and from YouTube. And then we're also going to look at some other embeds such as Twitter and possibly even some commenting and things like that. So moving on with the recipe site in week 8, we're going to do a little more CSS this week, and we're also going to work on media embeds. So that's all coming up.